This week, some important stuff. The ABC had to apologise to Jacinta Price for defamatory comments after the Deputy Mayor of Alice Springs and Indigenous women's rights campaigner launched legal action. The national broadcaster has formally apologised now for airing multiple radio segments that falsely accused Jacinta Price of spreading racist vitriol and hate speech. Unbelievable. Your tax dollars used to defame a courageous Indigenous woman. Jacinta Price joins us now. Good to have you with us, Jacinta. And I want to start with the remarkable piece you have in The Australian today of selective outrage about the emotive, fact-free reporting around Aboriginal deaths in custody. Why is the media so desperate, Jacinta, to connect these tragic deaths to racism?
Oh, because it sells papers, because it makes people tune in, because it's the popular narrative that if there isn't a level of controversy, then people just simply aren't interested in the truth, where the truth is, well, I guess you could say it's slightly controversial, but it's far less controversial when you can only point to those within your own families and within your own communities, as opposed to making this all about a race debate. And can I say that I'm very happy to finally make the Friday showdown, especially off the back of Nick's fat shaming there.
Can you believe it? Have you stopped playing sport, Jacinta, because someone somewhere told a bloke that he throws like a girl? I mean, I just cannot get over Nick connecting the obesity crisis to terms like throws like a girl. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he's right, Jacinta. What do you think?
I can't say the term has ever stopped me from captaining female Aussie rules or pulled me back from doing kickboxing and taekwondo, and as a teenager going up against boys on the mat in tournaments. So yeah, it hasn't deterred me. I'm still doing sport.
Well, Jacinta, I want to say welcome to the program, and I can't tell you how delighted I am to hear you say that, because we don't want any women or men being discouraged from playing sport from mean taunts, and the fact that you're not, or Rita wouldn't be, or I wouldn't be, is a good thing. But unfortunately, some people are put off by those taunts, and so we should all just do the right thing and drop it. But I do want to ask you about the very serious topic of Aboriginal deaths in custody. And I know you make the correct point that the number of Aboriginals in custody who die is lower than the general population. But that, of course, doesn't mean that there isn't a problem with Aboriginal deaths in custody, because we do have a very high Aboriginal incarceration rate in this country. Aboriginal people make up 3% of the total population of Australia, but 28% of the prison population. So the fact that there are a large number of people of Aboriginal background who are dying in prisons is still a very big problem in this country. You would acknowledge that?
Look, I think any death in custody, whether it's Indigenous or non-Indigenous, is a concern, is a tragedy, obviously. And our level of the high rates of incarceration is a huge concern. But what is often completely and utterly looked over by the media and certainly by activists is the number one reason why Indigenous people are incarcerated at such high rates as well. And if we don't actually tackle the issue of family and domestic violence, then we're never actually going to see that rate decrease. And for those who are incarcerated, almost 70% of those who are incarcerated, both men and women, are incarcerated for acts of violence committed against mostly their own loved ones. And I just recently had a meeting with the Central Australian Women's Legal Service, who are really deeply concerned at the rate of Indigenous women being incarcerated, and it's because it's based on the fact that it's either kill or be killed. These are women who are in long-term domestic violence relationships who one day retaliate against their violent partners and are now becoming the criminals and being locked up for these acts of violence. So it's a huge ongoing issue, and if we don't address it honestly, we'll never see those rates decrease.
Well, Jacinta, we see a lot of targets for reducing Indigenous incarceration, and Nick's focus again was on the numbers of Indigenous people who are incarcerated. But shouldn't the focus be before that? Shouldn't there be actual targets for reducing family violence and abuse so you don't have those people incarcerated and all the consequences of that?
Well, that's a very common sense approach, isn't it, Rita? And one that you'd think that many of our leaders would have caught on to by now, that prevention is better than cure, and attempting to juggle around legislation, race-based legislation that looks to minimise how many Indigenous people are incarcerated is not going to work. It's not going to stop the crimes in themselves. And one of the biggest concerns also is the fact that a lot of Aboriginal legal aid services actually are funded on huge amounts of money, but support the perpetrator, not the victim. Aboriginal women who are victimised have very little support at that end of the scale. And when you're funding legal services, you're actually needing a victim to be present for that process to take place. What we want is to stop there from being victims to begin with, and that means upholding the rights of our children to be able to grow up in households that are loving and caring, and not be withheld from being able to be placed in caring households because of the colour of their skin. Aboriginal kids need to stop being discriminated against and told, no, you must stay in dysfunction because apparently your culture is more important to you than your human rights. And Aboriginal victims need to be supported, and they need to be supported not just from the wider community, but mostly from within their own communities. And victims of abuse rarely, if ever, get support within their own communities, and this is a huge issue. I know women who have been run out of their own communities because they have been victimised. I know the witnesses who have been attacked for helping them to take the stand when their trial has come to seek justice for what has happened to them. I've seen this over and over again. So safety is another huge concern, and for activists to suggest that police should be defunded or removed from communities is utterly outrageous, because that's the last line of defence in communities that victims of abuse actually have.
Could I just have a quick follow-up question with that? Does the rhetoric that we've been hearing around deaths in custody, does that have a negative impact on women and other victims of violence coming forward and engaging with the police? Is there a chance that they're going to be too scared because all they hear about police is that they're systematically racist and you're likely to die in custody?
Well, yeah, not only that, but there's also the fact that largely these campaigns are about protecting and supporting perpetrators. At no point whatsoever is it suggested that, victims should be supported. And when it's clearly shown that there's huge amount of support for perpetrators, victims are going to be too scared to come forward in the first place. I mean, I know circumstances where there have been deaths in custody up here in the Northern Territory, where the individual I have been related to was for many, many years very, very violent toward a female member of my own family, had previously been convicted of gang rape of a teenage girl, and became a death in custody because of ill health while in custody. And then the outrage from the media was huge that, suddenly this individual became a victim of the system when that individual had been a perpetrator all of his adult life. So it is really concerning that this rhetoric does nothing also to promote self-responsibility, does nothing to highlight the main reasons why Indigenous people are incarcerated, because it's not due to racism and colonisation, which is largely what we're fed with absolutely no evidence whatsoever, yet all the evidence points to what I've been pointing to and is utterly disregarded, because it's not black against white or white against black. It's about black on black violence.
Jacinta, congratulations on your success in your defamation proceeding against the ABC. There was a part of that whole episode which I don't completely understand, and it's the fact that the original claims were made by the Coffs Harbour Aboriginal Land Council. Why didn't the local Aboriginal Land Council want you to come and speak in Coffs Harbour?
I can't speak about that at this stage, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to, not comment.
For legal reasons? Yeah.
I'm certainly not asking you to repeat any of the defamatory comments or anything like that. I'm just trying to understand why a local Aboriginal Land Council wouldn't want you to come and speak.
I think she's given some fairly good examples of precisely why, but if there's legal action there and it can't be talked about, it can't be talked about. Now, Jacinta, I want to ask you about one of the big stories of the week, particularly here in Melbourne where Neighbours is filmed. There's been racism claims from an actress, Sharina Clanton, against Neighbours cast and crew, the production there. Among Clanton's claims is that the program's producers would not pay for an elder to be present on set. Clanton wrote on Instagram, due to my insistence of engaging a Wurundjeri elder to be included for ongoing cultural safety reasons like cultural protocols followed and debriefing, I was told this is not a film production, Sharina, and that we simply don't have the budget. Now, what's your take on this, Jacinta? Many people were surprised by that complaint and that request. Is that something that is common? To be honest with you, I hadn't heard of a request like that. Is that something that Indigenous actors or artists or professionals in any field would be requesting, to have an elder present on set?
Well, I'd hope not. And again, it's this hand-holding business that apparently now all Indigenous people are somehow so fragile that we need our hand held wherever we go, whatever we do as full-grown adults, and that somehow we're precious because of our heritage or the colour of our skin. I think it's utterly ridiculous. I've not heard of it before, but there's a huge industry out there built on the fact that we're so fragile and we need all this support and this help and cultural safety and all those sorts of things. The comedy, black comedy on the ABC pokes fun at things like, who's going to do the welcome to country, who's got this area and who's got that area and who's going to cover this, because it's a huge moneymaker as well. So, it's like, that young lady, she was on Q&A and she, again, she repeated the myth around the Flora and Fauna Act that didn't exist.
She did not.
It did not.
Are you serious?
Even
the ABC have fact-checked that. Even the ABC have done a fact-check on the flora and fauna myth and, completely debunked the notion that Aboriginal people were considered flora. I'm surprised someone who's a member of the community and so passionate about activism in that area would be ignorant of that.
Well, and it's concerning when such individuals are making calls for, what they think should be happening on set. Like if you can't go ahead and carry out your job, to its full capacity without having your hand held, well, is that job right for you? You've got to ask these sorts of questions, and we should always be questioning these sorts of things, because I know in the past, and the reason why we've got to where we have is that a lot of the time media and people, certainly people of the left, just swallow this sort of nonsense, wholeheartedly without questioning it, without challenging it. And we've come to the point now where people somehow believe that us Aboriginal people are so very delicate that now we need elders to be sitting around watching on to make sure nothing goes wrong, that we're culturally safe, whatever that means, and that we can't just be human beings capable of being human beings in whatever profession we have and carrying out our jobs in that profession to the best of our capability.
Yeah, Nick, I don't think wants to ask about the Neighbours thing. You're staying well clear of that one.
I have enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, Rita.
Look, I've just got one last question for you, Jacinta. This story, I tell you, it reads like an April Fool's joke, but it ain't funny. Women's lingerie brand, Burley, has issued the most grovelling apology because an artist they work with allegedly culturally appropriated aspects of Aboriginal art in her work. You can see the art there. It's beautiful, in my opinion. But Burley said, we have confirmed this morning that this print was submitted by a non-Indigenous artist and used without appropriate credit to the traditional custodians of the land in which we live, learn and work. This was a collective mistake by the artists and ourselves, and we both deeply apologise. So what am I missing here? Are certain artistic methods now taboo? Are only some people allowed to have dots in their paintings? I mean, this is really quite astonishing. And the interesting thing is, after that grovelling apology, they've just copped more abuse from the activists saying that's not enough.
Look, it's so ridiculous, and usually you'll find that it's a non-Indigenous person jumping up in outrage on behalf of all other Indigenous Australians about the use of imagery. I mean, we're human beings. Everybody can be inspired in whatever way they can be inspired by from other human beings. If we really want to go down this path, well, then let's look at the didgeridoo. Well, it comes from the Yolngu people in the top end. That's the only group of Aboriginal people who play the didgeridoo. So does that mean other people, other clans, other language groups should not be using the didgeridoo because it doesn't, in fact, it's cultural misappropriation? I mean, the dot paintings that come from Central Australia came from Central Australia. That's where they originated from. They're not from all over the country, and yet other Indigenous people use this method of painting as well. Do we want to split hairs? Like, is this where we want to go, or do we
Isn't
just
it
say,
wonderful if other people are using if they've actually adopted those methods and said this is a beautiful way to produce a work of art, and they, instead of calling it cultural appropriation, shouldn't we say it's paying tribute to something that is beautiful and admired? I mean, that's how we used to think when people would borrow from others' cultures. It was a compliment.
Can I give you a slightly different take on that? So you go to marketplaces around Australia and you'll usually find a stall selling, Aboriginal cultural goods, artefacts, all that sort of thing. Often the gear is all made in China. Aboriginal person doesn't see a dollar of it. To me, that's sort of cultural appropriation.
But you can buy Australian flags that are made in China.
I'm quite happy to see that sort of ruled out so that...
So certain products
there's at least some
can't
connection
be made
to Aboriginal,
in China, but other products can. So you can have an Australian flag sold at the market that's made in China, that's fine. But if you've got an Aboriginal flag that's made in China, that's cultural appropriation.
No, I'm talking about, Aboriginal goods, might be musical instruments, didgeridoos, we've heard, and it's all made in China, not a single dollar going back to Australians or Aboriginal people. To me, that seems like not on.
That's not cultural appropriation. I mean, I don't know if you're complaining there are things that are inauthentic being sold as authentic, but I don't see racism and cultural appropriation in that argument, which is what's happened here. Jacinta Price, thank you so much for your time today. Sorry, go on.
No worries. I was just going to say, I mean, does that mean Indigenous artists can't do, Renaissance art, oil paintings? Does it work the other way as well, or is it just one way? If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. I don't think China should be ripping off any country, let alone Australia in its entirety.